Hey, a quick car video. So I just came back from a hospital birth. And so this would be my second hospital birth observation. So a part of the midwifery requirement for school or for the PEP route, which is just a portfolio apprenticeship route, is to observe 10 births, but 2 of them have to be hospital. So I just kind of want to talk about my experience, because I've never seen a hospital birth. As an assistant, of course, I assist home birth midwives, so this was a little different. So I contacted a midwife that I know. So this midwife that I shadowed and kind of like, was on, that movie Ride Along. It was kind of like just a tag along. So I kind of just like hung out with her for one of her shifts, her on-call shifts. So this midwife is a hospital midwife, and she's a CNM, so a certified nurse midwife. So meaning she, went to college, and she went and got her BSN, Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, and then went to grad school to become a certified nurse midwife, so midwifery specifically. So she's a hospital midwife. So I went, to tag along with her, and so one of her, I'm used to saying clients, because for CPM, certified professional midwives, or home birth center midwives, they don't have patients, they have clients. So I almost said client, but anyway, so her patient, it wasn't even her patient, she was kind of like a floater a little bit too. Like she was helping whatever doctors, MDs or OBGYNs were on shift. So the first patient, I got there, she texted me, and she was just like, okay, this patient is in labor, like, come on down. So I drove over there. I have like my observation badge, whatever. So I go in, and this patient, she's already been like laboring for a long time. She had an epidural. She had an epidural. And I don't know if she had any other like medications, but I know she had an epidural. She had, of course I'm just observing, and I'm just, paying attention. I notice different things. I'm looking at the whiteboard that they have in the rooms. And I'm looking at the whiteboard because for my 9-to-5 job, I'm a project manager, and anyway, my 9-to-5 job, we're doing a whole initiative within the hospitals, and to improve communication. And so a big piece of that is like the whiteboards that are in the labor and delivery rooms. Anyway, so I'm just making observations. I see also that this hospital that I was at, it is they implement the AIM bundles, and so that's a maternity care initiative. Anyway, so I'm just making all these observations, right? But anyway, so in the labor room, L&D room, of course there's the machines, there's the I don't even know what these things are called. What is it called? What is it called? Basically where you can see the baby's heart rate and the mom's heart rate, her vitals, everything is on there, right? But anyway, this mom had a epidural, and then let's just fast forward to the pushing phase. So she was pushing, whatever. The baby came out fine. This one, it was an MD. So it wasn't the certified nurse midwife. It wasn't the CNM who delivered the baby. The CNM was kind of just there, just there, if she needed. I think I think she was more so there because I needed to see a labor, and so she was like, oh yeah, well, one is happening here, let's just come in. So the baby was born, whatever. Of course they clamped the cord right away, so there was no delayed cord clamping. So they cut the umbilical cord from the baby. They took the baby after they clamped the cord and brought it to the warmer. So that's just an observation. Like, they didn't do any skin to skin contact, and skin to skin is just after the baby is born, just putting the mom, basically not taking the baby anywhere, like putting the baby on the mom's chest. So, you know, the partner or the husband, the mom could see the baby, bonding, whatever, right? So they didn't do skin to skin. They cut the cord and took the baby to the warmer. I noticed she was a little shaky. The mother, the patient, she was shaky, and that's like typical, because it's like labor shakes, like that's what they call it. Like that's kind of not uncommon, but I noticed she was kind of like really shaking, and so I was wondering. Like I said, I don't know. You know, I'm just coming into it new. I'm like, I wonder, is that like what's going on here? What is that about? But she was really like shaky. Anyway, so yeah, cut the cord, baby to the warmer. In terms of IV, so she does have an IV. In a home birth or a birth center setting, there is no IV. Unless there's a need for one, they don't really have IVs. They might have them in the birth center, but definitely not home. So she has an IV. And so she's already given Pitocin, like some Pitocin in her IV. But that was like while she was laboring, like that, from what I recall. Basically they give all the patients automatically Pitocin, you know, just to like as a preventative measure to prevent from postpartum bleeding. So they gave her, she had Pitocin going, she had an epidural, cut the cord, baby, I know this third time, but follow me, cut the cord, baby is at the warmer. I noticed, like I said, I noticed she was like shaking up a bit. Not in a bad way, but just her body, it was a natural reaction. Her body was just shaky. So I just made like, okay, mental note of that. I noticed, of course, they're putting the drops in the baby's eyes. Now for mom, I noticed that the doctor, like I said, it wasn't the midwife, it was the doctor. I noticed the doctor, she was kind of tugging on the umbilical cord, and I took, let's just say time of birth, like I took mental note too of when the baby was born. So let's just say the baby was born at 8 p.m. by like 8:05, the 8:04, 8:05, the doctor was like tugging on the umbilical cord. And so, which is not for the placenta to come out, which is not, you know, incorrect. Like that's kind of standard. Like that is appropriate if you'd like to, if you need to get the placenta out, tugging on it is okay, right? But it's just how soon she did it is my thing. So I'm like, dang, time of birth was just like 8 p.m. You know, it's barely 8:04 and you tugging, you know, like rather than to wait and just let it maybe like massage her out a little bit, or maybe just wait for it to come out naturally, or wait until she, well, I was gonna say, or wait until she says, I feel like I have to push, but she had an epidural. So, I mean, she can't really feel much of nothing. So anyway, I noticed the doctor started like tugging on the umbilical cord right away. And I was like, I'm like, dang, okay, so soon. Like I said, it's not to say that that's not standard, that physicians, doctors, midwives, or whatever don't do that. It was just how quick she did it. And I was like, okay. So that, and then as she was tugging, there was a gush of blood that came out. And so it's like, I noticed that and I was like, oh, okay, so a gush. Then when the gush of blood came out, but she was still tugging, you know, she was still tugging, and the gush came out, and I was like, oh, okay. And so then the doctor said, oh, such and such, to the nurse, can we get some Methergen going? But she was like, but wait until, she said wait until something. I think she said wait until after I get the placenta out. I think if it was Methergen, yes, because you have, Methergen closes the cervix, so we don't want to close the cervix because that would mean we couldn't get the placenta out. So I think she said, let's just get the, I think it was Methergen, and she said, let's get the Methergen like drawn up or like ready. So when that gush came out, I was like, oh, okay. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, you are tugging, but this is just how I'm processing it, right? This is just I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying I'm wrong, whatever. This is just how I'm processing. But I'm like, okay, after that gush, I'm like, well, yeah, you are kind of like tugging on it, tugging on the placenta. I mean, the placenta. And I'm like, it could just need a little time, and then after that gush, I'm like, all right. So she kept tugging and kind of tugging, doing some tugging, and she was like massaging at the same time and tugging at the same time. I'm like, okay. Then eventually it wasn't like, oh, she was pulling, but she was kind of like doing some cord traction. And so after a while massaging and traction, she got the placenta out, and then she started like bleeding. It wasn't a gush, but she was kind of like bleeding. And so I'm like, okay. So they gave her the methergin. They took the placenta. They have, the little whatever bowl or whatever. The doctor plopped it in there, and then she just kind of like. So now she took a snippet of the actual umbilical cord. Like, she cut a piece, and it has to be sent off to the lab. I guess that's something new that the state is doing. I don't know. For testing. I was like, okay, I need to look into that. Like, what is that about? So she took a snip of the umbilical cord and saved it to have it shipped off to the lab. Cord, I can't remember if she did cord blood or not, but that was that. And she wrapped it up and tossed it, right? And so, mental note, I'm like, oh, so she's not gonna examine the placenta? Like, okay, that's different. And then especially, and this was just, like I said, just my thinking, especially the way she was, tugging, and it took a little bit for the placenta to come out, and then there was that gush, and I'm like, okay, in my mind, I would want to see if there were any leftover pieces of placenta, retained placenta in the uterus because of that, because that's just my thinking. But she didn't examine the placenta. She just cut the umbilical cord, wrapped it in the the wrap, and then just tossed it. She didn't look at it at all. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Now, I don't know. Like I said, I've only seen home birth, so I don't know if maybe they're not taught to examine the placenta. Maybe that's not standard in the hospital setting, or maybe it's not standard for doctors to examine the placenta. I don't know. So I just know that she didn't, and I was like, okay, you might want to have, since there was a gush and you was tugging on it before it was ready, potentially. So I'm like, okay. So in terms of medications, from what I saw that the mom had, so it was epidural, Pitocin, because they gave everyone Pitocin for preventative measures, methergin, and I think that's it. So I'm like, okay, didn't examine the placenta, whatever. And she tore a little bit. She did tear. Ooh, excuse me. And so she stitched her up, and then it wasn't a bad tear. It was probably like first degree. And then stitched her up, and then, okay, that was fine, right? So that was the first birth. And like I said, this birth wasn't facilitated. The baby wasn't caught by the CNM, by the midwife that I was with. And she's black, by the way. Not the doctor, the midwife that I was shadowing. She's a black CNM working in the hospital. But yeah, so that was the first hospital birth, right? Cool. Then I remembered, because this happened a little while ago, a couple weeks ago, well, maybe a month now. Then, that was that. I went home. Then that same night, the midwife texted me. She was like, girl, tell me why the patient we just delivered had a seizure. I'm like, what? I'm like, a seizure? Like, I don't even know what that's about. Like, seizures after, like, postpartum seizure, I don't know anything about that. So I'm like, okay, I need to look up what the potential cause was. Because I'm like, what would cause a seizure? Like, shock, or maybe a medication that was given. I have no clue. But yeah, she had a seizure. So, okay. So that was the first, but everything turned out fine. But they said, when I followed back up with the midwife via text, she said something about, like, they think it had to do with, it was psychological. They think it was because she had trauma in her past or something. Then she had a seizure because of that. I don't know. So that was that. Then, then the second birth I was at, this was Yeah, so the second hospital birth just came from there. Let's see what happened. So got there, patient was laboring. Wasn't a hard labor. She had an epidural. She was given Pitocin. Like I said, everybody's given Pitocin for preventative measures. So this was a first time mom. Oh, I forgot to say. So both of these were primips. So prima gravida. So basically first time moms. Did I say that correctly? Primate is prime, first time. I'm wondering if I said prima gravida. Yes. Anyway, so yes, they were both first time moms. And so this one, the second birth, she had Pitocin, first time mom, she had an epidural. Let's see. So when she was ready, she had the shakes too. She also had the shakes, but she had the shakes not when birth was imminent, but when she was basically about to push, like while she, like, let's just say 2 minutes before she was pushed, she had the shakes. Like I said, I've seen the shakes. I've seen that in home birth settings, but it's usually not. It's usually like postpartum, like after they delivered, and it's like, okay, there was a lot going on. I'm a little shaky, unbalanced, right? That's when I've usually seen, the labor shakes or whatever in home birth settings, which is postpartum, and it's like, okay, they're trying to get up and go to the bathroom or like shower. That's when I've seen them shaking, not during labor or during pushing. I haven't seen that. But in both of these situations, in the hospital births, they both had the shakes, but it was like during, like not during pushing, like literally while they were pushing, but right before pushing, sort of. But anyway, so yeah, so this one, epidural, whatever. So fast forward, she's pushing, and literally after 2 pushes, the baby came out. Like, this one was very easy. An uneventful birth, uneventful labor. So the baby came out in like 2 pushes. They did not cut the cord. And mind you, let me say this birth, that the second one that I was at, the midwife caught so she was the lead, I guess. I don't know if that's the terminology, but she delivered. It was her patient. She delivered this particular client that I'm talking about now, the second one. Whereas the first one, the one who had a seizure or stroke, no, she didn't have a stroke, she had a seizure. The one who had a seizure was by a doctor delivered her baby, and I just observed with the midwife. And the second one, the one that pushed 2 times and the baby was out, the midwife caught that one. So yeah, so the cord was not cut, so they kept it, kept the cord intact for a little bit. And baby, they did skin to skin. Baby was placed on the mom's chest, right? So that, let's see, there were no eye drops. Yeah, like I said, this one was a very uneventful birth. So placed baby on mom's chest. After a while, it was delayed. I would say they did delayed cord clamping, but after a while they did cut the cord. After they cut the cord, she delivered the placenta. And she wasn't really like tugging on it like that, but she did deliver the placenta. And then after the placenta came out, she kind of did a little tour. Like, the midwife was like, put it in the, I forgot what you call it, but the little container, and was like, oh, this is, this is the placenta, this is where this was, this is where that, blah, blah, blah. So she did snip pieces of the umbilical cord, because they have to, and ship it off. And she was like, oh, this is the placenta, this is where the baby was, this is where it was attached to you, blah, blah, blah. She did that. She did all that. So she, like, while doing that, she was also examining the placenta. So the midwife that I was with, the CNM, examined the placenta. And so after all that, yada, 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 okay, cool, then they tossed the placenta. And then after a couple of minutes, they initiated breastfeeding. So those were the pieces that I kind of remember with this particular birth. So delayed cord clamping, a little bit, yeah, delayed cord clamping, skin to skin. She examined the placenta, and they initiated breastfeeding. As compared to, and the mom didn't tear anything. She didn't tear nothing. Like I said, baby was out in 2 pushes. So delayed cord clamping, skin to skin, initiated breastfeeding, examined the placenta. Whereas the first hospital birth that I observed, yeah, she was given they both had epidurals, but she was given Methergin for her bleeding. There was no delayed cord clamping. The provider didn't examine the placenta. She was tugging on the placenta. Like I said, it's not unusual to do that. It was just she did it very soon, in my opinion. And they also didn't initiate breastfeeding. So those were the differences, right? And so in terms of hospital birth compared to, out of hospital birth, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh my gosh, like it's so different. Like there are differences, or like it was only 2 births. Like I can't really, and then 2, they knew I was coming, so it's like, oh, they could have been on their best behavior, like the nursing staff. Like I was around nurses, all of that. So it's like they could have been on their best behavior, like whatever. So in terms of treatment, how the treatment is different, all of that, like I can't speak to that, But in terms of process and observing those different processes, yeah, it's just, in terms of laboring, like I said, I wasn't there for all of their labor, but they were pretty, they weren't really mobile. I will say that they were in the bed. And even that whole time I was there for both of the births, I was there, let's just say like 4 or 5 hours for both. I think the first one even a little longer, like 4 to 5 hours. And that whole time they never got up and moved. Like they didn't get on the birth ball. They weren't on their hands and knees or anything. They were just kind of like in the bed, just like waiting till it was time to push. I think, whereas, let me take that back. I think the second birth with the midwife, they did have the peanut ball, and they had her lay on her side and use the peanut ball for a little bit. But other than that, they were in the bed. Like they were and then too, that's another thing. Because they did have epidurals, your mobility is a little limited. It's not impossible. You don't just have to lay there flat on your back. But, the sun is starting to come out. But yeah, because they had epidurals, that did kind of like limit their mobility a little bit. So I will say that. But in general, if you have an epidural, there are still things you can do, like in the bed, to kind of like move and, whatever. I'm not saying you get up and walk around and be on the floor and in slings. I didn't say that, but there are a couple of things. But they just kind of like laid there and like waited, like, all right, is it time to push yet? Like, what else? So yeah, weren't very mobile, but they did have epidurals. Neither of them had like doulas. Neither of them had a doula. The first one had, I think, the baby's father, and I think her mom. And then the second one with the midwife had her husband and her 2 little kids, or 2 little kids. They came in with the husband like right when she was pushing, but they weren't there the whole time. So there's like subtle differences, in terms of, but I will say it's interesting, what the midwife did. My midwife, I'll say my midwife because that's the one I was in connection with, and that's who I was observing and shadowing. It is interesting then because the midwife, she did the midwife things. You know what I mean? Like, she examined the placenta. She said, oh, look, this is your placenta, yada yada. She, you know, showed them. She initiated breastfeeding, like all of the things, like made the ambiance like nice, like we out before this not client, before this patient started pushing. We went in and decorated, like we went in and had like those fake candles, like, and we placed them, you know, everywhere, like, we, you know, had to feng shui, whatever. So she did all of the midwife things, you know, versus the provider. The provider wasn't rude or anything. She didn't have an attitude, nothing like that. But the provider, she yeah, she didn't look at the placenta. It was like, you know, let's not wait for the placenta to come out. And like I said, I don't know what sort of conditions or problems made this patient could have had. I don't know, right? But these are just my observations. But yeah, it's just different between the provider and the midwife, like how they handled it. And then I remember after that second birth, because it was uneventful, it was quick. It wasn't quick, but the birth itself was quick. So I remember after that, we went back into her little cubicle. It wasn't a cubicle, her little dorm or whatever, which is actually cool. Because when she said, like, oh, girl, I'm going to be on call this weekend, I'm thinking she's like, and she can't go home like that whole weekend. And so I'm thinking she's at the hospital, like curled up on some chair, like sleeping that way, or like some back office. But no, they have a whole like room that's like down the hall on the nursing floor. They it's like down the hall, it's a code, like you punch the code on the door, you go in. It's like a little dorm room, literally. It's a dorm room. It has a bed, it has a computer, it has a nightstand, you know. So she in there, she got her bonnet in there, she got her personal bag, personal snacks, her laptop, she got her, you know, music playing. We listening to music and we're just like chatting, and in between she's like, we're like talking, and she's like on the computer doing like charts, like doing her charts. Like, so I'm like, oh, okay, this is cute. It was cozy, it was comfortable. So I was not expecting that. When she's like, oh, I'm gonna be on call all weekend, I'm picturing in my mind like she gotta go in the you know, employee lounge and like find a blanket and we just in there. But no, it was nice. So after that, you know, after that birth, we went into her like room or whatever, and we were just chatting, and I was like, so is it, you know, standard of care that everyone examine the placenta? And she was like, yes, everyone, you know, after every birth you examine the placenta. I'm like, okay, that's what I thought. And the provider didn't do that. I didn't say that, but I'm like, okay, mental note. And then, you know, there's active, I think it was active versus passive management. But basically, one is like being proactive for preventative purposes versus not. And so the provider, I think that's what the provider was doing, possibly with the placenta, just wanting to like get it out. It wasn't like she was like pulling, but I think that's what was happening there. Yeah. And then she was just saying like, yes, it's routine, like all patients, they just get Pitocin, you know, that's just routine for preventative purposes to prevent postpartum hemorrhage. Yeah, and those are like all of the things. And then we were just kind of chatting and talking about you know, being a midwife, you know. And so she was cool. And so that was it. Those were my 2 hospital birth experiences. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciated it because, like I said, I've never seen a hospital birth. Yeah, I've never seen a hospital birth. So I'm like, I don't know what happens. And so as it pertains to like getting there and stuff like that, I can see how I would recommend that, you know, whether you're a CPM and you might have to transfer, or you're maybe a doula and you have clients or something and they're gonna have a hospital birth, whatever. I definitely recommend, and I can see how it's useful to either do a hospital tour, or just to visit, before you're actually in labor. Because even me getting there, she's like, all right, be on your way, and I'm like, okay, I'm driving, and then I get there and I'm like, which door? Like, I can see how it's like kind of like overwhelming, you know what I mean? Especially if it's like the middle of the night and you're like, you don't know what is what, and you're like, oh my gosh, what button do I push, what door, like, you know. So I can see how getting there, like taking a hospital tour or just making sure you visit before you're like, don't let your first time being at that hospital be when you're in labor, you know what I mean? So definitely that. Yeah, so I appreciated the observation. I had fun. I enjoyed, hanging out with the midwife. We had coffee, it was like, let's just say 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and they had like a little, the coffee, what was it? Coffee place? I forgot the name of the coffee place, but they had that. So we had like iced lattes, and we're just kind of chilling. I had a cheeseburger. It was bomb. So I had a turkey burger with all the fixings, sweet potato fries, and I don't think I got a drink, but all of that was like $5. And I'm like, where outside of this hospital can I get a turkey burger and sweet potato fries? Not regular fries, sweet potato fries for $5. Like, okay. But yeah, that was pretty much it. Yeah, I appreciated it. I would like to know more about like the workflow and the process of how labor and delivery goes, and protocols and all that, how it goes, in the hospital setting, especially if you have to transfer your clients to the hospital, just so they can know like, okay, what's going to happen when I get here. So yeah, I appreciated that. I'm trying to think of, was there anything else that like stood out to me or that was like, okay. No, I can't think of anything else. But yep, that's it. I'm gonna go. If you have, 30 minutes. If you have any questions or comments, or you have your own experiences at a hospital, either delivering at a hospital or being a doula at a hospital, let me know, and I'll talk to y'all later. All right.